Night leans gently over a city of earthen walls, and lamps begin to glow like small moons along narrow streets. You hear a soft rustle of pages and the low murmur of voices at a doorway, and you wonder how a desert town became a lantern for ideas. Timbuktu's fame is bright, but the real light is quiet. Scholars tracing letters, traders counting salt, children listening at thresholds. Many historians think a single night here can show you more than a stack of dates. How did books become a kind of currency without feeling cold? How did people find the hour in a place where the sky rules more than any bell? And how did learning, trade, prayer, and family share the same cool air without crowding it? We will walk through one night, step by step, meeting a teacher, a copyist, a caravan guide, and a grandmother who knows the price of paper. You will taste the dust, feel the river's breath, and hear the soft thud of sandals on packed earth. In a moment, the call to dusk prayer will fold the day, and the city of scholars will open. Dusk settles like a soft cloth over flat roofs, and the city sighs. The heat that pressed all afternoon begins to lift, and walls made of earth start to glow with their own stored light. You can taste dust in the air, but it is a friendly dust, warm with sun and now cooling under a wide sky. Doorways open. Courtyards release the day's heat in a slow breath. The first notes of the call to prayer slide across lanes like a low river and turn corners no map can show. In a moment, we will follow that sound and see how it pulls the night into shape. The ground under your sandals is hard, a mix of packed earth and old steps. Houses stand shoulder to shoulder, their faces plain, their secrets inside. Wooden beams poke from the walls like resting ladder rungs. They are not decoration first, but ready-made perches for hands when plaster needs new. Life after wind and rain. In this light, the beams throw long stripes. A child runs along one of them with a finger, then laughs and vanishes into a doorway. The city looks simple from the street. The story lives in courtyards where families eat and talk. In a moment, we will step near one of those inner rooms and feel how a plan can guide without a ruler. Timbuktu's lanes bend to the wind, not to a king's pride. Many historians think this is why the streets feel kind at night. They were drawn by shade, breeze, and feet, not by force. Corners are soft. Walls rise and fall with the small changes in ground. When a lane narrows, it is often because a courtyard widened on the other side to hold a tree or a well, and the lane agreed to make room. People here know the quiet logic. Privacy is inside. Community is in the flow of the street and the rhythm of the mosque. In a moment, we will watch how the first prayer of evening arranges the flow. The call comes from more than one place. A voice from Gingaber moves like honey. Another from Sanka answers a breath later, thinner because of distance, but steady. Sidiyoya adds a tone that finds its way between the two, like a thread pulling a stitch tight. You cannot see all three at once from down here, but you can feel them. Each mosque draws its quarter, as a well draws a circle of life. Lanes that looked crooked all day now become straight, because they point to sound. In a moment, we will reach a small square, where people gather without shouting. The ground opens just enough for a pause. Women lift water from jars that sweat coolness. Boys push a goat toward home with a soft scold. Men fold cloth round shoulders to meet the breeze. No one needs a clock. The sky and the call agree, and feet know what to do. Shoes come off at thresholds. Sand leaves toes in quick practiced strokes. Inside the mosques, the air holds a little more shade, and sand underfoot feels polite. It is prayer that settles the day, but it is also habit. The city is a body that loves to breathe together. In a moment, we will move past one wall and notice how sound and sand help learning without books. Gingaber's skin is earth and wood, and it loves sound. Notes travel along walls and return soft enough to invite the next line. Many houses share this gift. Lessons at night will use it. After prayer, parts of these same spaces become classrooms you would not recognize in daylight. Mats for sitting, a niche for a teacher. A wall that remembers words and throws them back kindly. When people say Timbuktu is a city of scholars, they mean this as much as any library. The rooms are humble and tuned to voices. In a moment, we will step away from the crowd and let the river speak. The river is not at the city gate, but it lives, close enough that the air keeps a secret cool. A footpath leads toward its port, and the breeze knows that way by heart. Many historians think Corium, the river harbor, is where boats unload goods and stories by day. At night, the river is a breath you cannot see. It brings the scent of red and wet clay to the edge of a lane, and a person who has carried loads all afternoon will turn toward that faint promise without thinking. The desert and the river take turns here. The night belongs to both. In a moment, we will return to a door and see what the courtyard saved for this hour. A courtyard in this city is not just a yard, it is a small world. It holds a well or a jar, a bench, perhaps a low tree that keeps the sun patient for half the day. As evening comes, mats are laid. A meal is shared in a circle that makes sense, no matter who has crossed the threshold. Grain, steamed with a steady hand, a sauce that tasted like the market this morning, dates kept for sweetness, and milk if the herd was kind. Laughter is part of the food. You can sit on the edge and feel welcome without words. In a moment, we will listen to what older voices say when the last plate is set aside. Stories begin in sentences that do not hurry. A grandmother talks about a market day when dust rose like a curtain and a caravan appeared where the horizon had been empty. An uncle adds the practical part, which seller had fair scales, which had a light thumb. A child asks how people know where the wells are in a desert, and 3 answers come at once, none of them wrong. Stars, roots learned from older mouths, and the mercy of someone who walked ahead. Facts travel here in braided lines, law in one strand, verse in another, memory in a third. In a moment, we will tiptoe away because a different circle is forming in a lane. After prayer, a teacher sits with students in the glow of a small lamp. Some are boys, some are older men who still like to sharpen their thought against other minds. A page lies open, but the page is not the loudest source. The teacher's voice is he recites a line, then traces ideas in the air with a finger. A student asks a question in a tone that is both brave and respectful. The talk turns, then returns. It is like walking a familiar path and noticing a new plant growing out of the same stone. In a moment, we will return to the map in our heads, and set 3 mosques on it. More clearly, Sankas sits like a thinking room attached to the sky. Its square courtyard and prayer hall hold lessons that last past dark when nights are cool. Jingabar is a steady giant, older by tradition than the others, and its long hall makes a gentle echo you can lean on. Sidi Yoya has a door that people speak of with love, a piece of wood that carries a story told many times, promise, patience, and a time when opening will mean more than a hinge. Each mosque anchors a quarter and a mood, debate, memory, quiet advice. Together they hold the city's mind in place. In a moment, we will walk a lane that leans toward a market corner even after stalls have folded. Stalls do not go to sleep just because the sun has. Night makes the air kind enough for business to continue in small ways. A man sells lamps that hold their flame against a playful wind. A woman shows cloth woven in a pattern that her fingers remember even when her tongue forgets what to call it. The boy carries paper carefully, as if it were a jar of water, because here paper is precious, a promise waiting to be written. Gold is not the loud guest in this market. Salt is. Slabs stack like slow ships, white even in this light. In a moment, we will follow the salt back along its path a few steps, because roots shape cities as much as walls do. Some roots come from the desert north with a taste of Taudani in the mind-brine wind, and long flat lines that make a rider talk to himself. Some roots slide along the river from the south, carrying stories from forests and mines as much as they carry goods. Timbuktu stands where the world switches shoes. Boats unload to camels. Camels hand the burden to backs and donkeys. Books move in both directions, sometimes faster than gold, because a page travels in a pocket. This is how a city grows famous quietly. It becomes a hinge. In a moment, we will touch a myth, because fame brings those like flies to light. People far away tell each other that Timbuktu is a city made of gold, that doors shine, that sand hides palaces with floors of coin. Those stories are too heavy for the lanes you've walked tonight. The real gold is thin and brown and smooth under a hand. A manuscript page copied with care, a promise written, a legal opinion tucked into a bundle, a poem that helps a child remember a rule. Gold dust does appear at tables when deals are made, but it sits beside paper, salt, and names. Wealth here is a network of trust you could draw with lines, if you had a very big page. In a moment, we will listen again for the call that started this night, and see how it returns to close the circle. The last light is gone, and the sky is full of the kind of stars that make people feel they could listen forever. Another call floats over the roofs, soft now, like a friend's voice at the doorstep. Doors close with kindness. Lanes still hold people, but their steps are lighter, and their words are few. The same mosques that opened the evening now lower the flame, so houses can keep their own small lamps. A scholar rolls a mat. A trader settles his ledger under a cloth. A child repeats a line of verse until sleep takes the last word. In a moment, we will pause at a corner where 3 lanes meet, and pick which one to follow next. You can turn toward the port and catch the river's breath, toward Sanka and find the circle of students still weighing a line, or toward a quiet house where a copyist is trimming a reed pen by lamplight. Each path is part of the same city. Each path shows why a night here feels calm, even when stories call it great. The greatness is not loud. It is a habit of listening to the sky, to the law, to trade, to song. We return to the question we opened, with how a desert town became a lantern for ideas, and the first answer lies all around you. The walls are tuned to voices, the streets lean toward meeting places, and the people know how to let sound guide a night. In a moment, we will step into that lamplit room with the reed pen, and watch how a book is born one line at a time. A slow treasure that outlives dust and wind. The alley is quieter after the last prayer, and the air feels lighter on your skin. A narrow door stands open, and inside, lamplight softens the edges of a small room. Mats are set in a circle, low and close, and sandals line up at the threshold like well-behaved notes. A scholar sits with his back to a mud-plastered wall that holds the day's cool a little longer. His beard is neat, his robe simple, and his eyes have the rested look of someone who spends more time listening than talking. Students arrive without hurry, nodding to one another, folding into the curve of the circle until the room is a quiet lake. In a moment, the first words will touch the surface and spread. Lessons here begin with voice before they touch paper. The teacher recites a short line from a book everyone knows in some measure, letting the syllables sit clean in the air. A student repeats it, a little unsure, and the room answers with gentle smiles, the way a family does when a child says a known prayer. When the sound feels right, the teacher adds the next line, not as a test, but as a path. Many historians think this canned response is the base of learning in this city, as steady as a drumbeat under a song. You hear how the walls do half the work, returning the words without echoing them too hard. In a moment, the circle will widen from memory to meaning. The book tonight might be a legal manual in the Maliki tradition, or a short text on grammar, or a collection of sayings that help shape a life. The teacher gives the words and then leans into them, explaining a term with a story, comparing two opinions like 2 kinds of rope, one for drawing water and one for tying a load. He is not a judge here. He is a guide on a path many feet have walked. A student asks why a merchant's promise to deliver grain next season must be written when 2 neighbors trading a goat today can seal it with hands alone. The teacher answers with calm examples, whether distance, memory, risk, and the students nod because the market is not an idea to them. In a moment, a line of poetry will slip in to hold the rule in place. Verse is a friendly tool in Timbuktu. A short rhyme helps a rule stay in the mind when sand and errants pull at the edges of thought. The teacher sings 2 lines in a plain tune, and the students answer, testing the rhythm on their tongues. The rule, once dry, becomes a small river that you can carry with you. Many scholars here collected such verses into guides, not to decorate the law, but to keep it honest in busy lives. When a traveler repeats one on the road, it is like carrying a folded letter from the city's mind. In a moment, you will notice that the circle moves without a bell. No one looks at a clock. The lesson has its own breath. A warm, sweet drink comes in small cups and circles the room, not as a feast, but as a sign that the hour is kind. Some houses used mint leaves, some used other herbs. Tastes shifted across centuries with the caravans, and that is part of the city's quiet story too. The sip is a pause that lets a hard idea soften. You can see shoulders drop when the cup touches a palm. The teacher waits for the cups to return to their tray before opening a new door. In a moment, that door will reveal a way of arguing that does not raise a voice. Debate here is a polite sport. A student offers a question with the phrase, "What if?" and the teacher answers with "It is said." Then others say, then perhaps the stronger view is, giving space for each strand to show its strength. This manner has rules, older than anyone in the room, rules that keep heat from replacing light. A student who presses too fast meets a hand lifted just so, a reminder to let the idea breathe. Many historians think this patience made the city famous as much as any gold. It taught minds to bend without breaking. In a moment, the circle will shift from law to the grammar that holds the law together. Grammar is a quiet skeleton under every page. The teacher writes a word on a wooden tablet with ink that can be washed and used again. He shows how a vowel's length changes, meaning the way a small change in a road can lead you to a different well. He points to the end of a word and asks what it is doing there, and a student, after a heartbeat, says, answering the verb, nods travel around the room. Letters are not only shapes, they are manners, and they must greet one another properly. For a sentence to make sense, in a moment, the tablet will pass to a younger student, and the reed pen will make its soft scratch. Not all students have the same grasp, and no one is shamed for it. The younger boy copies slowly, tongue-peeking, in care, while the older student watches with a kindness that tells you he was the same last year. The teacher uses short examples from home life: how a guest is seated, how a camel is loaded, how a mother names the same child with two different tones, and shows how grammar rides on these habits. A rule on the board becomes a room in the mind. When the ink dries, the board is washed with water and a palm's edge, and the lesson lives on in voice. In a moment, the talk will turn to time itself, and you will hear how astronomy and prayer keep company. The scholar asks the circle to imagine a caravan at the edge of the desert, stars rising over a flat line where there is no landmark. He points to the roof, where a square of night shows a familiar cluster. He names it softly, the way a person names a friend at the door. The students talk about how the times of prayer move across a year, and how shadows on a mosque wall teach the city when to gather. Astronomy here is not a grand show. It is a set of tools for daily life. Even the legal problems under debate earlier, lien on the sky contracts, come due with seasons, not with manufactured hours. In a moment, the teacher will touch a manuscript and explain how voice and page agree. A book lies on a small stand. Its pages brown, its edges soft, its letters steady and close like a careful field. The teacher opens to a margin where a note lives in a smaller hand. He explains that texts here are often read with their commentaries, and those with their own commentaries, layers like family resting in the same house. Ownership marks sit quietly in the front, names, dates, a prayer for the reader, and the circle understands that this book has moved through many hands. The teacher does not read long. He uses the page as a lamp for the talk. In a moment, he will speak about permission, a word that means more than it sounds. Permission to teach, a license many call an ijazah, travels by voice and page together. A teacher who is satisfied with the student's understanding gives him not a degree as we would, but a note that says, "I heard, and I pass to you what I heard from my teacher," and then names his teachers in a chain that reaches backward. The document is simple and strong, like a rope with many knots. It does not make the student a master of every subject under heaven. It lets him share what he has truly grasped. In a city where trust is currency, this little chain means you can sit with a stranger and know which stream his water comes from. In a moment, a visitor will lean at the door and bring the desert back into the room. A caravan man stands quietly, waiting for a pause. He has a question about a contract for carrying books south on the river and north on the sand. He wonders how to price a load when half the value is on paper and will become much more only when it reaches the hands of a buyer far away. The teacher listens, then turns the question to the circle. A student suggests a share of risk. Another mentions witnesses at both ports. A third recalls a line of verse that warns against greed disguised as caution. The visitor smiles because the answers sound like the road, layered, practical, and watchful. In a moment, the cups will move again, and the room will soften into stories. People tell short tales that wear wisdom like a light scarf. A merchant who returned late but kept his word. A judge who delayed a ruling one night to cool a village and saved a friendship. A boy who memorized a poem while waiting for a goat to kid. The teacher allows these to braid into the lesson, because knowledge needs images as much as it needs rules. You feel the earlier lines settle deeper, because a face, a road, a goat now carry them. Many misunderstandings about Timbuktu come from imagining only tall stacks of books and ignoring these low, warm circles. The stacks exist. The circles give them life. In a moment, the teacher will draw the meeting to a rest without saying time. Ending is as gentle as beginning. He closes the book, not with a snap, but with a hand that lingers on the cover as if to bless it. He repeats the key line once more, in the same tone as at the start, and the students answer without looking at one another, the way a flock turns. He asks if anyone holds a burning question. When none does, he asks for patience until tomorrow, for all the other small fires. Then he speaks a short prayer for safety in the night, for mines, for traders, for travelers, for the river to keep its promise. The circle loosens, and the mats make a soft hush as people stand. In a moment, you will follow two students into the lane and hear how learning continues between doorways. They walk side by side, repeating the verse under their breath, smiling when they miss a syllable and catching it on the second try. One speaks of a copy to borrow tomorrow. The other thinks of his aunt, who keeps a small box of paper for a fair price when the market runs thin. In this city, families hold learning with both hands. One hand counts coin, the other turns a page. The students part at a corner, promising to meet at the same door after dusk tomorrow. This is how a school grows without a building sign and without a bell. It grows by habit, hospitality, and voices that stay calm even when ideas are knotty. In a moment, our path will turn toward the lamp you saw earlier, where a copyist trims a reed pen, a boy grinds soot and gum into ink, and a family library breathes like a small chest with a good lock and a generous key. The room is small and patient, cool at the edges where the plaster has kept the day. A lamp makes a steady island of light on a low table. A reed rests across a smooth stone, as if taking a breath before work. You smell a clean, faint sweetness, the kind that comes from gum sap warmed in a little water. A boy grinds soot with slow circles, careful not to let the powder rise and tickle. His nose, the copyist, sits with a calm back and a narrow knife, and in a moment you will see how a pen can be made sharp enough to carry a city's memory. A reed pen is cut like a tiny door. The copyist trims the end with 2 quiet turns of the blade, opens a small slit so ink can travel, and shapes the tip to match the tilt of his hand. He tests it on a scrap, listening as much as looking, because a good nib makes a soft, steady whisper. When the sound is right, he smiles with only one corner of his mouth. The boy brings the ink, darker than tea, and the copyist nudges it with a drop of gum, so it will dry smooth. In a moment, you will see the paper that waits at the edges, strong and more precious here than any plate. Paper has come a long road to enter this room. Many historians think much of it arrived from cities to the north, folded tight against dust, then wrapped in cloth and carried on camelbacks. It is not made in this house. It is kept safe in this house. Sheets sit under a board to keep them flat, and the top one shows a faint pattern in the light, where a maker once stretched wet pulp on a screen. The copyist lifts a sheet like you lift a small bird. He rubs it gently with the smooth stone to calm any roughness left by travel. In a moment, lines will appear where there were none, and a page will gain a map. Ruling is done with a light hand. A thread stretched across the board, and a dull point drawn along it, leave pale guides that only the scribe and the lamp will notice. Margins stand wide and respectful, ready to hold notes from other minds yet to come. The copyist sets a rectangle small enough for the eye to cross without strain and large enough for the voice to sit comfortably if someone reads aloud. He places a wooden weight to keep the sheet obedient, then touches the reed to ink. In a moment, the first letters will lift like birds from a reed bed. The script he writes is round where it needs to be and brisk where it can. A style many in this region know by sight, even if they cannot read it. Letters lean into one another like attentive neighbors. A short line ends, and he leaves a breath of space before the next begins. Thinking of the student who will follow the track later with a finger, he may leave a pocket for a larger first. letter or for a title in red. But color is scarce tonight, and clarity is the first wealth. In a moment, the boy will whisper the name of the buyer, and you will hear how a book becomes both tool and treasure. The sheet in hand is part of a commission, a legal text, and its brief companion notes. The buyer is a younger jurist who plans to teach from it and to lend it to a cousin in a nearby town when the season turns. Book ownership here is more than pride. It is savings. A volume can be pledged for a loan, inherited with care, or placed in trust for a mosque school, so that its pages earn their keep by teaching. Many historians think families in Timbuktu treated books like gardens. They fed them with time and gained food and peace in return. In a moment, you will see how the price is set without a shout. Prices live in the front pages like quiet footprints. A note might say, "This was bought for a fair sum," and then list value in gold dust measured by weight, or in cloth, or in a debt forgiven. Sometimes a cow stands in for numbers, or a sack of grain promised after harvest. The copyist and the buyer drink from the same small pot, and a witness writes a line in the margin with his name to bless the trade with clarity. The city trusts names more than it trusts counting alone. In a moment, you will see how lending runs on the same gentle fuel. Lending a book is not a casual act. A borrower comes with a simple pledge, sometimes a tool, sometimes a small piece of jewelry, sometimes only a strong name and a promise to return the pages clean. The owner may ask a friend to listen as the borrower reads a line aloud, not to test him but to bind the words in memory. A date for return is set by the sky more than a number. Before the third Friday, by the rising of the date palm moon, a small note goes inside the cover, and the book set out into the world feels like a child walking to the next house. In a moment, we will look at the marks that make a family library a living map. Open a book and you see not only lines of the main text, but small voices at the edge. A grandfather's hand leaves a prayer, "O God, protect whoever reads this." A student writes a brief comment, light as a thread. Teacher so-and-so explained this as such. A daughter who managed the house accounts notes a sale price in careful strokes, then later adds, "returned in good state." The pages hold ownership marks that carry blessing formulas, not to boast, but to guide a volume back if it wanders. The effect is tender. You feel that the book knows its house. In a moment, the copyist will pause at the end of a section and wash the pen. Ink is refreshed slowly. The boy swirls the small pot, and the copyist stirs with the tip of the reed to wake the soot and gum. He tests again on a strip, scrapes the nib with a single wise flick, and lays the reed down to rest. A cup of tea appears, and breath returns. Two shoulders. The talk is brief and full of names, teachers, buyers, cousins who want to borrow a treatise on travel law before they set out, and a grandmother who remembers the time fire kissed the chest and was pushed away by a wet cloth, and a quick prayer. In a moment, we will step to that chest and see how paper sleeps. The chest is low and broad, with a lid that fits like a polite hand. Books inside are wrapped in cloth to keep out dust. A small piece of fragrant wood, saved from a gift long ago, rests among the bundles to persuade insects to live elsewhere. Some families also use smoke from herbs for the same reason. The chest stands on feet, so damp does not climb. When a volume is returned, hands are washed, the wrapping freshened, and a short line in the house ledger says so. It is not a museum. It is a pantry. In a moment, we will follow one bundle out to the table and watch as a new page is joined to old ones. Sewing happens between breaths. Sheets are grouped into small gatherings and stitched with thread through tiny holes pricked with a careful awl. A simple cover may be added now, leather or board wrapped in cloth, or it may wait until the buyer can choose. The binding is less about display than about keeping pages where memory placed them. The book grows not thicker only, but steadier. A family that owns many such volumes sometimes straps them together for travel, or stacks them in a niche, carved into a wall that stays cool even when the air outside does not. In a moment, the copyist will reach a last page and leave a small human signature. A colophon is a shy door at the end of a book. The copyist writes a line, "This was completed by the hand of Ewan," and adds a day named in the old way, by week and month, and a short plea for forgiveness for any errors, inviting a kind reader to correct them. He may note where he sat and who paid for the work. These quiet paragraphs are gifts to future historians, but in this room they are simply good manners. They tie the pages to a life. In a moment, a customer will arrive, and you will see how book and buyer greet one another without pretense. The buyer is not loud. He enters with a smile and a question. Has the ink dried enough? The copyist shows the last page raised slightly to catch the air, and the buyer waits rather than press a finger and risk a smudge. He reads a few lines, nodding at the familiar slope of letters. He asks about the margin notes already written by past owners and smiles when he sees the names he knows. Family libraries talk to one another across time like neighbors at doors. Payment is made with courtesy, measure of dust from a small leather pouch, a fold of cloth, a promise to repair a fence for the copyist next week. In a moment, the talk turns to lending, because books in Timbuktu almost never sit still. The buyer plans to teach from the book next week, and to lend it to a cousin after that. He asks for a copy of the house's lending note, and the boy writes the borrower's name on a small scrap with the title and a date set by a moon. There is pleasure in this, not worry. A book is most alive when moving through hands that read, argue, and bless. People in distant places sometimes imagine libraries as locked rooms. The truth here leans open, with care. In a moment, the copyist will close his knife, bank the lamp, and speak one last line that shows what books mean in a city like this. He tells the boy, we do not count only pages. We count what they let us do. Judge fairly, travel safely, pray with understanding, trade without cheating. The boy nods, and in that nod are the market, the mosque, the road, and the quiet of this small room. The reed pen lies ready for tomorrow. The ink will be covered with a flat shell against dust. The chest will sleep. Outside, the night market stirs with low voices and careful hands, ready to measure salt, gold, and paper under stars. We return to the question we opened this circle with: how pages become both savings and status, and see how the answer is folded into the city itself. Books earn, books teach, books connect. In a moment, we will step into the cooler streets, follow the smell of roasted nuts and the sound of friendly bargaining, and watch how credit and trust work when no one carries more than a strand of gold and a very good name. The night market opens like a book that saves its best chapter for cool air. Lamps hang from hooks and make small islands of light where hands meet across goods. You smell roasted nuts, warm bread wrapped in cloth, leather, and dust that has finally decided to rest. The ground feels easier underfoot now that heat has gone. Voices are low and patient. There is no shouting match, only questions that sound like old friends catching up. In a moment, we'll lean near a table and listen to a bargain that moves by breaths more than by coin. A seller places a pair of scales on a woven mat and sets small stones beside them, each with a name in the city's memory. A buyer pours a thin stream of gold dust from a leather pouch, the kind that closes with a clever twist so nothing is lost. The dust does not clink, so people watch closely. A third person, a witness, nods when the beam balances. No one writes a long paper here. A line in a small ledger later, and 3 names said out loud, do the work. You can feel the trust, the way it rests between palms like a bowl of water. In a moment, we'll turn to the brighter shape in the market. The white slabs that shine even under stars. Salt is the steady guest of every evening. It arrives as heavy rectangles that look like they belong to winter, even in this warm place. A man taps one with a stick to show it rings true and shaves a corner for the buyer to taste. Another buyer counts in his head how many such slabs will soften a year of meals, how many will trade for cloth when a cousin marries. In this city, people say salt is life with no poetry meant, only gratitude. The slabs move easily from hand to hand because their use is so clear. In a moment, we'll step to a quieter blanket where paper is folded like a sleeping bird. Paper at night feels daring and gentle at once. A woman lifts a bundle and shows the top sheet under a lamp so the buyer can see the grain. She knows exactly where these sheets came from and how many days it took to bring them. She is not only a seller, she is also the keeper of who needs what. A jurist's order for 20 leaves next week. A teacher's plan for small tablets for his students. A cousin who pays in cloth because last month her coin went into a cow. Names are the cords that tie this trade together. The woman writes a tiny mark on a loop of string, ties it around the buyer's bundle, and that is enough to bring the purchase back to memory later. In a moment, we'll move to cloth, because color also carries value. In a city of pages, cloth hangs like calm water from a pole. Patterns speak languages, some from here, some from the river towns, some from far kingdoms whose names arrive on the same caravans as the dye. A buyer runs a thumb along a seam, not to doubt, but to greet the work. If the cloth will become a robe for a visit to a scholar, a softer kind is chosen. If it will become cushions for a guest room where travelers rest, a stronger weave is better. People here match use to fabric the way they match words to law. Not every thread fits every need. A final knot on the seller's string is a promise to deliver to a certain door before the second prayer tomorrow. In a moment, we'll step back from goods and listen to the music under all this, the instruments of trust. Credit is a path people walk together, and it starts with names. A merchant buys salt tonight, not because he has all the gold dust in his pouch, but because 3 people in the market would vouch for him by sunrise if asked. A lender agrees to carry a risk for a share in profit, and they name the witnesses. Who will listen if memory disagrees later? Nothing is hidden. Most of this is spoken gently where ears can keep it safe. Many historians think this mixture of spoken promise and short notes, signed or sealed, was how large trade could live in a city where cash never tries to be king. In a moment, we'll sit near a scribe who lends his hand when a deal wants ink. The scribe sets a small board on his lap and unwraps a reed pen. He writes a few lines that name buyer, seller, goods, the shape of the promise, and the moon by which it will close. He adds a blessing that leans both ways. May God make this honest, and may he give memory to all. 2 men press their thumbtips in the margin, a seal as plain as rain. A girl watches and smiles when the pen lifts, because one day she will keep the family ledger that holds these notes, and a neat line now makes her future work lighter. In a moment, we'll visit a stall where a different kind of promise is made. A man who runs a small caravan offers to take parcels north, for a fee that sounds like a fair story. He does not promise speed that the desert will not allow, but he promises care, stones for balance under the pack, extra water lashed to the side, and a small charm his mother stitched into the cloth long ago. The buyer does not only pay, he asks questions that show he knows the route. Which well will you reach first? Who keeps its bucket? What shape do the dunes take after the 3rd long day? Answers come like low music. The deal settles when both men hear the same road in each other's words. In a moment, we'll turn and see how women's hands keep these roots alive from another angle. Women stand at the market's center of gravity, even when they seem to sit at its edge. They manage lists at home and here, handling small loans within family webs, balancing what is owed to an aunt against what is expected from a son. A woman may hold a little box of coin, a pouch of dust, and a roll of paper orders with equal calm. She remembers who returned a borrowed book 2 nights early, and who kept it 3 nights late, but sent a cousin to explain. She makes time by meals and moons, not by numbers on her face, and it works. In a moment, we'll hear a soft disagreement, and see how it ends without cracked voices. 2 men face each other with a scale between them that leans a little to one side. One insists the stone has lost weight. The other suggests the dust has clumped. A bystander, an elder, touches the beam and asks them to breathe. He suggests they use his stone instead, and invites the scribe to watch the needle. A few grains shift, the arm lifts, the beam finds level. The elder gives no speech. He tips his head toward the night and says, "There is enough trouble in the world already." The men laugh, fold hands, and trade blessings as they finish. This too is wealth, a way to end small storms fast. In a moment, we'll step toward a corner where music, of a kind, counts time. Not far away. A man taps a small drum in a pattern that people here have heard since childhood. It is not loud. It keeps a pace for a storyteller whose voice rides. The tale concerns a woman who saved a caravan by recalling a well when the sky offered no clue, and how she named each trader's share when they reached town, so no one left bitter. The story is funny and practical. Children lean against their mothers and learn how trade is supposed to feel. This is a city where stories grease gears. In a moment, we'll look at a small table where one trade ends and another begins. Here sits a money changer with a smile that weeds out trouble before it grows. He has scales for dust, eyes for cowrie, shells that wander in on the river from faraway seas, and fingers for cloth that stands in for both. He charges a small fee, named without drama, and offers advice only when asked. He keeps notes for people who cannot write and reads back what he wrote if they forget. He does not try to look powerful. He tries to look accurate. Accuracy is power. Enough in this place. In a moment, we'll return to salt and gold, because they speak different dialects of value. Salt can be counted, stacked, and licked. Gold dust must be weighed, cupped, and watched. Salt belongs to meals and roads. Gold belongs to promises. Both move under stars, and both sit now under lamps, but they draw different behaviors from buyers. A woman haggles warmly over salt, certain that she knows the worth of a week of soup. She goes quiet over gold, certain that she would rather set the terms at home with her husband and a cousin who knows scales like a second language. Markets respect this. They leave some things for later rooms where math, memory, and tea can sit together. In a moment, we'll notice how the market ends its night without a bell. Closing comes like sleep in a courtyard after a long meal. Lamps burn lower. Stalls do not slam shut. They fold. A seller tucks scales into a cloth and sweeps his square of ground with a palm. A buyer carries his wrapped paper as if it were bread. The scribe blows on the last line and lays his pen to rest with a small smile you saw earlier at the copyist's table. Trade steps back so prayer and sleep can have the center again. In a moment, we'll watch the guards at the gate speak to caravan men who have chosen to rest inside tonight rather than under the open line of the sky dot by the gate. Men sit in a loose circle and speak softly about winds and wells. They measure distance with stars and the feel of a camel's gait, not with the flat hands of a ruler. They ask the guard about tracks seen today, about gossip from the river, about whether the northern road has hosted a sand that bites or a sand that sings. The guard shrugs, the way a man does who has seen both and trusts neither. He offers a prayer for a safe route and a seat inside for those who want the wall's company. The men thank him and tilt their heads toward the sky, because the night is clear and will give them answers if they wait. In a moment, we'll return to the center of the market and feel its last warmth. A boy with a tray sells the final handfuls of roasted nuts. He moves like a friendly wind, stopping where buyers still count and sellers still count less. He would go home with coins, shells, and a story for his grandmother about the traveler who bought extra to send to his mother on the river. That is how wealth moves here, not only in heavy things, but in favors, news, and little kindnesses. When the tray is empty, he will run along a beam on the wall and try to beat his own quiet record before ducking into a door, laughing with the same sound you heard when dusk began. In a moment, the lamps will go, and the market will look like memory. You stand at the edge and watch shadows redraw the place into simple shapes. Tomorrow, it will bloom again with the same calm grace. You have seen how numbers step aside for names, and how trust replaces locks when the night is kind. You have also seen how risk is shared with care, how witnesses and scribes keep the center honest, and how women and men carry the market together. We return to an early question, how a desert city made trade gentle without losing its strength. Tonight's answer is all around: low voices, balanced beams, quick smiles, and time kept by cups, moons, and stars. In a moment, we will walk from the last lamp toward the gate, where caravan men look up, where maps live in the sky, and where the next chapter of this night will be written line by line on the black page above. The city wall holds a cool shadow, and men sit with their backs to it, legs folded, hands easy on their knees. Camels kneel a little beyond, folded like boats at low tide, their mouths moving as if chewing a thought. The gate stands half open to let the night breathe through. The air is clean here, washed by distance and by the promise of stars. A guard passes with a nod that says he knows these faces and their work. In a moment, one of the men will lift his chin, and the sky will become a map. They speak softly at first about the day who sold salt, who found paper, who must return to the river at dawn, with a letter tied in oilskin. Then the talk lifts. Someone says the name of a well, and the others answer with the pause that belongs to it. Each well on the northern road has a proper space before and after. a measured silence that holds the days and nights between. They do not speak of miles, they speak of prayers. From this gate to Aroani is so many dawn prayers and so many night prayers. If the wind behaves, in a moment, a finger will draw an invisible line from their feet to that first stop. A man points to a bright star low in the north, and then to a cluster that sits like a small bowl. He names them with the names his father used, and you could feel the road open just by hearing the sounds. The North Star offers a quiet mercy in these latitudes, steady enough to be a hinge while other lights circle. But they do not follow only one star. They read the rising of one, the setting of another, and the way a third keeps pace with a certain stretch of the horizon. The sky is a song with more than one drum. In a moment, they will talk of wind, because wind tunes the song. The heart, dry and pale, comes from the northeast, and tastes like chalk. It sets a veil between eye and distance, and steals water from skin. When it blows, the dunes take on a sharper edge that tells a rider which backs to follow, and which to avoid. A south wind from the river carries wet, and makes sand hold a boot, print longer. The men place these facts beside the stars, not beneath them. They travel by a braid of cues. You could learn one strand and still lose yourself. They teach the braid. In a moment, they will hum a tune that keeps camels in step. A caravan moves by sound as much as by sight. There is a low chant that leaders use, a line that rocks the animals into the same rhythm so loads do not bite. The words change with the man and the mood, but the beat stays. Sometimes a bell hangs from the led camel's breast, not loud, just enough to stitch the line together in fog, or in a night so soft that the ground and the sky agree to hide the horizon. The chant counts in its own way, not 1, 2, 3, but dusk prayer, dawn prayer, and a cool hour when a man can think of home. In a moment, we will step with them to the first day out. They describe the land as if they are touching it now. From the gate, the ground lies flat and hard, friendly to feet and hooves. Then it grows shy of water, and each thorn bush becomes worth noticing. The first day must be gentle. Camels that carried city weight all week need to find their long legs again. People must let the desert set the pace. They stop in the thin shade they know, at a place where nothing looks important, but where ground remembers that water once passed, and it keeps a little generosity. In a moment, they will show how prayer times sit inside this road like stones in a wall. Prayer rides with caravans the way wind does. Dawn prayer wakes the first long stretch, when light is cool and voices are low. Midday prayer becomes shade as much as words, a pause under cloth when heat tells truth. Afternoon prayer is a careful turn that says, you have done what you could and must not press foolishly. Sunset prayer drops like a calm curtain and invites cooking smoke and stories. Night prayer leans toward stars and toward a watch rotation, so someone's eyes are always friendly to the dark. Many historians think these shared hours were also the caravan's safety rule. No one wanders far from the call. In a moment, a man will speak a well's name like a blessing. Arawain sits in their talk as calmly as a bowl on a mat, not large, not small, but inevitable. It is a hinge between worlds. There are other wells, of course, shallower or deeper, famous or shy, and they name them with the care you reserve for parts of your own body. Each well has its manners. One asks to be approached from the west because the wind stacks sand to the east. Another hides until you see 3 stones laid long ago in a line that only people raised by this road would notice. Routes are stories you learn with your feet. In a moment, someone will trace a route that leans away from north, because the sky alone is honest but not sufficient. They talk of a line that slides west-northwest toward other oases whose names move like water across their teeth stops in the Tuat or Tagaza regions in other centuries. Places where the ground cuts the winds, height, and people carve a living out of the edge. The path is not a string pulled taut on a map. It breathes around dunes and low hills, bending to avoid flats that hold old salt where wheels sink without warning. Even in a night as clear as this one, the men remember that clouds can fall to earth as sand, and ask for humility. In a moment, the oldest among them will tell how he learned a trick that is not written in any book. He says that in fog or dust, you must listen to the camel's feet. Sand pressed by wind in the last day has a crust that breaks with a certain sigh. Sand that lay quiet makes no sound and hides softness under a skin. He learned to feel these with his toes when he walked beside his animal one evening, and now he hears them in the leather through his soles. He says this low and laughs at himself for sounding like a poet, but no one laughs at the knowledge. The desert is a teacher who does not raise his voice. In a moment they will talk of food and water, because roads are nothing if bellies are not steady. Water skins hang like small moons in their camel shadows. They are goatskin or cowhide, sewn tight, smoked to make them stubborn against leaks. Their mouths are tied with care, because a careless knot is a lie to tomorrow. Each man knows the sip he must take, the sip he must save, and the sip he must share without being asked. Food is simple and deliberate grain that swells in hot water, a little dried meat or fish, a date that carries the sun inside it. Tea, when fire allows, is more than drink. It is a schedule. One boil says, "We have reached the pause. To say the story can begin." 3. Say the night is friendly. In a moment, a star will rise that turns all heads, not for worship, but for bearing. They lean back and point. The dipper tilts, the bowl pouring toward the horizon, and the North Star stands where it should. A thin path of light, the river of night we call the Milky Way, lays itself diagonally across their roof. It is a rope laid by heaven, and men along this belt of earth have used it for as long as anyone has words. The caravan strings itself in the same angle when the ground allows. A young man repeats the names under his breath, like a prayer that opens a door. Older men let him say them wrong once, and right the second time, because kindness also prevents getting lost. In a moment, they will speak of signs left by other hands. They mention stone piles that sit low, except when a moon lines them like a drawn blade. They speak of a broken pot buried near a thorn where branches grow against the wind, because a clever person left the shirt there to tell a thirsty stranger, "Dig a little." They speak of two dunes that always seem to lean toward each other, as if gossiping, and how to pass between them so the leeward slide does not take you. The desert holds such marks politely, and erases them when it needs to teach a fresh lesson. That is why memory is shared in groups, not hoarded in one head. In a moment, the talk will turn to danger without breaking the night. They do not call bandits by loud names. They say only that bad luck has faces, and that routes chosen by greed invite more of them. They travel wide in daylight when they must, and close at night when they can, avoiding profiles that shout wealth to lonely eyes. They speak of storms the way sailors speak of waves, with respect and a plan. Cloth in the mouth, back to the wind, beasts turn to present their flanks, and patience while the world tries to move from east to west all at once. They keep rope ready, not for drama, but to tie one to another so the line does not unravel. In a white world, in a moment, the conversation will fold back to religion as naturally as a hand finds its other hand. Guides set times by prayer not only because they believe, but because shared rituals keep people together when fatigue would make them strangers. The muezzin's call cannot climb a dune, so the leader becomes that call, naming the hours the way a bell does in a city. The direction of prayer fixes the direction of travel in the mind. The prayers are a rest for the body, a reminder for the soul, and a mark on the map all at once. When they reach a town, as they have tonight, they thank with coins and with goods, but often also with lamp oil for a mosque, or a small gift for a school. In a moment, the men will speak about how such gifts return to the road. A trader says, almost shyly, that he promised to bring a little jar of oil for Sankar's lamps if he sold his salt today at a good rate. He did, and he will. He smiles and adds that those lamps lit a page for him when he was young and could not pay. Another says he has pledged a book to a family library in memory of his father, who taught him the first stars. The city and the desert trade more than goods. They exchange light. Oil becomes study. Study becomes advice for roots and contracts. Roots and contracts become wealth. Wealth becomes oil again. In a moment, the gate will murmur as someone passes through, and the circle will thin. The younger men go first, to sleep near their animals. The older ones linger, leaning into the wall, as if listening for stories it has kept. They do not list distances or boast of speed. They name wells, winds, and prayers like priests of a wide-open temple. When they rise, they do so in the same rhythm they will use tomorrow on the hard ground, hurried, exact, friendly to knees and to hope. You can feel the road leave with them, even though they do not move. In a moment, the guard will look up and read the same sky with his own needs, and the city will fold its night tighter. We return to the question that hovered when we stood at the market's edge, how roots, wells, and winds live in memory, and tonight's answer is simple and layered. Mouth to ear, star to finger, prayer to pause, story to muscle. A map sits in the sky and in the body at once. No one here pretends that a single tool is enough. The braid is the thing. You could sleep on that thought, and many do. In a moment, we will leave the gate and walk once more among walls, because the same care that guides a caravan by night shapes the rooms where learning glows. The mosques have their own maps written in shadow and sound, their lamps fed by endowments from traders like these, and their courtyards tuned to morning voices. The first mosque rises out of the lane as if it grew there, a hill with straight sides and a face made of sun-baked earth. Sanka does not try to glitter, it tries to last. Wooden beams push through the walls like resting fingers, and they are not decoration first. They are ladders for the future, places where hands can hold when the plaster must be renewed after wind and rain have spoken. The courtyard inside is a square of cooled air, and at its edge, night begins to sound different. A footstep is softer here. A word lands and stays. In a moment, you will hear how a room like this becomes a classroom without furniture and without fuss. Teaching lives in circles on mats. A teacher sits at a pillar's shade. Students gather by age and level, the close ones sure of the text, the outer ones testing their memory against the air. A page rests on a low board, but the voice leads. Law sits near grammar. Arithmetic sits near poetry. Astronomy leans in when someone raises a question about the new moon. No one builds separate rooms for each subject. The mosque's body holds them all, the way a single palm holds many dates. Sand lies at the edges of the floor, as if the desert wanted to listen. In a moment, we will tilt our head and notice the roof, because it explains why sound feels kind. Here flat beams cross under a skin of earth, and small vents lift the hot breath upward. Thick walls keep day's heat from making night impatient. The angled faces outside throw sun back toward the sky. The niches inside garrison shade. When a teacher speaks, the words travel along these surfaces and return as if softened by cloth. Many historians think this simple physics earth, drinking harshness, timber-breaking echo, helped make a city of study survive in a hard climate. Architecture is not a backdrop, it is a partner. And when wind pushes sand against the base, the same beams that look like ornaments become scaffolds for annual care. In a moment, we will cross to the giant built under the sign of a king. Jingabur is a long breath laid in mud and wood. Tradition says a learned man from the north advised its shape in the time of a famous ruler, though scholars gently debate details. And that is part of the building's story too. It holds more than one memory without breaking. The prayer hall moves in bays, one after another. Cool aisles of shadow, where a child can sit and trace a letter on his knee, while a jurist explains a rule nearby. A minaret climbs like a stack of soft boxes, not to dominate, but to carry a voice. When rain comes at the edge of the desert, it comes like news. Afterward, the city repairs the skin of the mosque together, smoothing wet earth over dry with hands and songs. In a moment, we will step to Sidi Yahya, a quieter friend, with a door people speak of with love. Sidi Yahya rests lower, like a person who prefers to listen in a crowd. Its doors are carved and dark, and the story told in many families says, a promise was made about when they would open for the first time, a promise kept across years with patience. Whether every piece of the tale is fact or kindness, the effect is the same. The door has become a lesson about timing and respect, about the difference between power and trust. Inside, the space is more intimate than Jingabur's long hall, and it gathers students close for advice that wants a smaller room. Inheritance puzzles, travel rules, quarrels about wells. A single lamp can light many faces here. In a moment, we will ask how those lamps keep burning across seasons. Lamps in these mosques do not feed themselves. They have patrons with careful hearts. A trader who made a good sale might vow to provide oil for a month. A family might give rent from a shop at the market to the endowment that pays a teacher's bread. A caravan man might deliver a small cask each year as thanks for a safe crossing. These gifts take the form of a waqf, a trust that lives beyond one person's life. A field, a stall, a granary, a palm grove, their income moves quietly into light, mats, and ink. It is not grand speeches that keep study alive in a desert city. It is steady arrangements turned into habit. In a moment, we will watch how those habits meet the weather that argues with every roof. Sand is a slow visitor, polite but stubborn. It creeps along lanes and leans against walls until walls learn to lean back. After the harmattan, a film of fine dust lies on ledges and thresholds, and people sweep it away from prayer lines without complaint. Once a year, and sometimes more, the city gathers to feed the mosque's fresh skin. Men climb the beams. Women mix earth and fiber in a clean pit. Children carry baskets with a pride as large as the buildings. The repairs are not only maintenance, they are memory. Each patch is a handshake with ancestors who pressed the same mud. This is how earthen architecture wins its argument with time, by returning to the well every season. In a moment, we will sit again in Sanka's court and feel how such walls help the mind. A teacher opens a page and the court quiets itself. He recites, comments, listens, and then calls on a student to repeat in his own words. Grammar is not precious here. It is a tool that keeps law from wobbling. Law is not harsh. It is the fence that keeps a market fair. Astronomy is not romantic. It is the clock for prayer and the contract. A question about dowry leads to a verse that helps the idea travel. A question about witnesses leads to a story about two neighbors and a date palm. This cross-pollination is not a slogan. It is the old way of study in these rooms. In a moment, we will hear how the same voices move from mosque to home without losing tone. When the lesson ends, the teacher walks out through a low door and into a lane, and the circle stretches thin, and then reforms in a courtyard with tea. The mosque is a school, but so is the house. The endowment pays for oil at the prayer hall, but the aunt who buys paper keeps grammar alive after dinner. You could say the city itself is one long hallway with classrooms leaning on it. The mosques anchor the ends. Even the minaret, which looks outward, also watches inward to see where the lamps are trimmed and students are fed. Many misunderstandings about Timbuktu come from imagining a separate university with iron gates. The reality is softer, a weave of places and people. In a moment, we will return to sound, because it is the quiet hero of these rooms. Packed earth turns voice into bomb. A reader does not need to shout for the back to hear. A judge does not need to pound a table. He lifts his fingers and the wall carries the gesture for him. The floor dampens the scrape of a heel so the idea in the air does not trip. Even the wooden beams play their part, catching and breaking echo, so words do not return louder than they left. When the wind presses at the door, you hear a low hum that reminds you that this is a building in a living climate, not a museum. Architecture teaches patience by how it sounds. In a moment, we will place a hand on a pillar and feel another kind of sound travel. Pillars are cool in the night. Their face is hard but not sharp. A touch from a child's hand to a pillar's skin tells the child that study is strong, even if he is small. A tap from a teacher's ring draws attention more gently than a clap. And when someone recites incorrectly, the teacher may touch the pillar and start again, as if leaning on a friend who knows the line. In these rooms, ideas are not weightless. They carry the feel of wood, clay, and palm fiber. That makes them easier to remember when the sky turns bright and work returns. We return to the promise we opened with two. See how architecture, sand, and sound make classrooms, and we can taste it now, calm and earthy on the tongue. In a moment, we will lift our eyes to the carved door of Sidi Yahya and listen to a line of poetry in the lane outside. A poet waits there with a jurist, and their talk is half law, half song. The poet tests a verse that holds a rule about witnesses. The jurist smiles, because the rhyme may save a merchant money one day. They argue softly about a word, and the mosque's wall keeps the heat out of their voices. Behind them, a boy traces letters in dust with a stick and hums along without knowing it. This is how subjects marry here in the doorway, under a beam, inside a story. In a moment, we will leave them mid-conversation and step toward a family courtyard, where accounts sit beside a kettle, where paper orders and guest lists mix, and where the city's learning is fed with bread, kindness, and a clear head for Numbers. Evening rests on the courtyard like a shawl, light and warm but not heavy. A lamp makes a small circle on the ground where two men sit facing each other with cups near their knees. One wears a jurist's calm, the kind you get from listening all day and speaking only when the right word arrives. The other has a poet's smile that comes and goes, as if lines are visiting and leaving in the span of a breath. Children hover at the doorway, because what starts here often becomes a story they will trade tomorrow. The courtyard wall keeps the wind soft, the sky keeps the room wide. In a moment, a question from the market will land between the two men and become something people can remember. The jurist speaks first, setting the matter like a bowl between them. A trader promised to deliver a bundle of paper by the third Friday, using a caravan that had space and luck, but a sudden dust storm delayed the start. The buyer wants to cancel and reclaim the gold dust he placed in trust. The seller says the promise stands because the delay is the sky's, not his. The jurist names the parts gently: promise, risk, witness, and custom, because the city's law walks on these 4 feet. He tells the story with the slow care of someone placing weightstones on a scale. In a moment, the poet will press his lips and try to fold the whole bowl into a couple of lines that fit in a pocket. The poet listens for the hinge, not the decoration. He hears that weather is not negligence, that witnesses saw the dust handed over, and that the caravan left on the first safe wind. He repeats the facts in plain words, then tilts them into a rhythm. A promise made with weather named is safe. A promise made with weather ignored is weak. He works the rhyme until it sits, soft enough to carry, but sharp enough to open later. The jurist nods because the verse holds the rule without bruising the truth. A boy at the door repeats the 2 lines under his breath and grins. In a moment, a second case arrives from the next room. This time, a knot that ties law to family. A widow has lost her husband, and the family must divide what he left. The jurist names the shares in a calm voice, the ones the community knows well. From many evenings like this, what belongs to the wife? What belongs to the children? What goes to parents if they live? What remains for close kin? He speaks with clean words, no technical flourishes, and he keeps his eye on the faces as much as on the figures. Numbers matter less than fairness, felt as fairness. The poet waits, then offers a phrase like a ladder. First the fixed chairs, then the rest by nearness. He turns the order into a gentle chant that the widow's brother can repeat without looking down. In a moment, a child will ask why the poem matters when the jurist already knows the rule. The jurist smiles and explains that memory is a shy animal. It comes when the house is quiet and hides when the market shouts. Verse catches memory by the hand and keeps it from running away, while people count cloth or walk a long road. A poem is not a judge, it is a lamp. If the lamp flickers, they go back to the book and the teacher and trim the wick together. Many historians think this is how complicated rules lived in ordinary hands across this city, by song, by story, and by calm repetition in places exactly like this. In a moment, an older man will clear his throat and bring up travel, where law meets night air and needs a blanket. The older man tells of finding a lost bundle at a well halfway to the north. It held a blue cloth and a letter with no name, only a prayer for the bearer's safety. He asks when such a bundle can be claimed, when it must be announced, and how long a finder must wait for a rightful owner. The jurist answers with reasons. Instead of thunder, the bundle should be announced in the next town at the first market, he says, and again for a short season after. If no one comes, it may be used with care, and the letter kept safe, in case the owner arrives another year with the same handwriting. The poet snips the answer into 2 lines that finish each other, one about the market's voice, one about the keeper's patience. In a moment, the conversation will tilt to witnesses, the small pegs that keep big tents from flying. A girl who has been listening asks, who can be a witness? When people travel far from home, the jurist says the best witness is a person who loses nothing by telling the truth and gains nothing by bending it. He adds that custom-white people here call earth speaks loudly on the road. If caravans in a region treat a thumbprint as a seal, the thumb becomes a good witness. If they use a carved sign on a rope, then that sign lives like a name. The poet turns custom is a witness, where books are scarce, into a couplet that sits smooth. The jurist adds, smiling, that a bad man with a perfect signature is worse than a good man with none. In a moment, the courtyard hears laughter because a story wants to be told. A caravan leader once swore that a goat ate his contract, the poet says, and the room chuckles the way a city does when it recognizes a cousin of a truth. The jurist answers that goats do eat paper, but good people do not feed it to them. He explains that wise traders make 2 copies when they can, or carry short notes with different friends along the route, so no one's goat can swallow the whole trust. The poet throws a final rhyme across the story. 1 goat eats paper, 2 friends eat lies. The line will outlive the goat by many years. In a moment, the talk settles like dust, and the lamps make a new space for a harder subject, quarrels that pour heat into cool rooms. A man at the gate asks about a neighbor who dug a channel from a shared well toward his field without speaking. First, he is angry, but he keeps his voice level because the courtyard asks that of him. The jurist breathes and lays the pieces out. The well is shared. The channel changes the share. The words between them are colder than they should be. He suggests an old way that has worked longer than anyone's beard. Bring to other neighbors, let them each measure 1 day of water to both fields, and bind this with a short note and a cup of tea. The poet adds a line that sounds like a smile. Divide the water, keep the road. It is an old sentence, but it fits, and the anger begins to melt. In a moment, the jurist will show how a ruling is given without pushing a man's face into it. He does not lecture. He invites both men to speak once, then folds their words into a decision that sounds like their best selves. He uses names, not pronouns, so no sentence can slip and cut the wrong person. He writes the agreement clearly, and the witnesses sign with thumb or word. Then he praises the men for choosing peace in public, because praise is a tool too. The poet adds nothing. Now, because silence is the right meter, the courtyard breathes out. Many misunderstandings about law. Imagine it as a hammer. In this city, it is often a thread and a needle. In a moment, the poet will change places and suggest a rule, and the jurist will check the seam. The poet says there should be a simple line for contracts that cross seasons. Name the moon. Name the risk. Name the witness. He sings it and waits. The jurist nods and adds to small stitches. If the goods perish by a harmattan before the caravan leaves, mention what happens. If the road closes for a month, mention how both sides will share the waiting. The poet tries the line again with the new threads woven in. Children at the door hum along, pleased that they can help the city keep its cool. In a moment, someone will ask why a poet should be let near the law at all. The jurist answers before anyone can make a joke. He says, a poet enters where a book cannot go, into mouths that are busy, onto roads where hands are full, into nights where lamps are small. A poem is a water skin for a rule. If the skin leaks, they mend it, but they do not throw away the water. The poet bows his head a little, because praise makes poems nervous. He says the city is full of verses that sit on dates and scales and doors. He is only adding a few more. We return to our earlier thought that this is a scholar's city, with a market's heart, and the courtyard shows both beating in time. In a moment, the talk will drift toward the next room, where tea cools, and where another half of the law quietly lives. The jurist mentions the account books that wives and aunts keep, the borrowing notes pinned with string in a chest, the list of guests for next week's scholar visit, and the paper orders stacked near the kettle. He says that many disputes die before they are born, because those books are neat and those women are patient. The poet nods and offers a new couplet. Her ledger, his oath, 1 rope. The jurist smiles and says the rope is the whole city. The children repeat the line as they slip away to bed. The lamps sink a little lower. In a moment, we will step into that household, the one where trade and teaching share a table, where the smell of ink mixes with fried dough, where names live in both a family tree and a ledger, and where the quiet strength of women keeps scholars on time and caravans honest, without anyone needing to raise a voice. The courtyard door opens with a soft push, and the house greets you like a friend who has already set out cups. Cool air has collected against the plaster. A palm frond shifts the last of the day's heat away from the table. A low shelf holds a neat row of ledgers tied with string. The smell here is equal parts ink, fried dough, clean linen, and a little mint rising from a kettle. An ant sits where light is kind to eyes, her scarf pinned in a way that keeps both work and welcome easy. She does not look busy, yet 5 paths cross her hands at once. In a moment, you will watch those paths braid without a tug. On the mat, a girl reads a short passage from a legal primer, slow and sure, while her older cousin turns a page in the house ledger and notes a payment for paper due next market. A boy smooths a sheet for tomorrow's copying and checks it for snags with his fingertip the way a baker feels dough. A tray of small cups waits like a polite chorus. At the wall, a chest rests on low feet. Its lid bears chalk marks that look like doodles but are actually a quick list for the morning oil. Thread, lamp wicks, and a visit owed to a neighbor who lent a scale. This is not a shop, not a school, not a guest house, and somehow all three. In a moment, a soft knock at the outer door will show how hospitality and trade share the same plate. A woman from 2 doors down steps in with a smile and a folded paper. She greets the aunt by name and sets the paper on the mat with a respectful tilt. It is an order. 10 sheets for a jurist's new student circle, a small bottle of ink, and a promise that a cousin will return the borrowed grammar next week. While tea cools, the aunt reads the order aloud, repeats it once to fix the details, and ties a string round a bundle already half prepared because she knew this request would come. She adds a slip that names the student and the date by the moon, and then she draws a tiny sign the family uses as a seal. You see how a house remembers as well as any office. In a moment, a traveler's wife will arrive with a different rhythm. In her voice, she comes from the river road with dust on her hem and news in her hands. Her husband sent a message. The caravan reached Arawan late but safe. Buyers want more paper next month. 1 bale of cloth tore and was mended honestly. She sits. The tray moves. News becomes entries. The aunt notes the request for paper, the good name of the man who mended the cloth, and the day the caravan turned, after the 3rd night wind. She does not hurry, because hurrying makes figures slip. When the traveler's wife leaves, she carries not only bundles but a blessing for the road, and a fresh verse from the poet that helps a price stick in the mind. In a moment, the ledger will open to older pages, and a very old story will step out. Many historians think families like this one kept small endowments that fed learning across seasons to palm trees pledged to a mosque lamp, a rent from a market stall promised to pay a teacher's bread, a tiny share of a caravan's profit set aside to buy ink for poor students. The aunt shows you one note, written by her mother long ago, a pledge of oil to Sanka for the month after harvest, because God brought our boy home from the desert with all his fingers and his book. The note is simple and steady, renewed each year as a habit that outlived the writer. A house can hold a city's promises if someone cares for them. In a moment, the door curtain will lift, and a scholar will enter with a kind of request that needs both tea and math. He is gentle, with eyes that still carry classroom light. He needs copies of 2 chapters for his students, and he will pay, half now in cloth, and half later in gold dust, when a debtor settles. He asks also if the aunt can spare a little paper for a widow who has joined his circle and learns faster than fear. The aunt listens, weighs, and nods. She sets terms that are fair by both book and custom. Cloth, at today's measure, dust by the 3rd Friday, paper for the widow as a gift from the family library, and a note placed in the ledger so no one later calls kindness a mistake. She fills cups, and the scholar shares a short line that made his students smile. The room keeps it the way a niche keeps a lamp. In a moment, a child will tug a sleeve and ask a question that lives where law meets life. Who keeps the keys? He asks, looking at the chest with longing. The aunt laughs softly and shows him a ring with 3 small keys. One is for the chest. One is for the inner shelf, where costlier paper sleeps. One is for the ledgers. She names the rules that travel with the keys. Never open alone. Always wash hands. Speak aloud what you took and why, even if no one is there. The children repeat the rules like a game. In this house, secrets are rarer. Then Locke's trust is the thickest door. A modern person might call it controls, but the aunt simply calls it peace. In a moment, 2 young women will arrive with a question about marriage gifts that belongs to both law and love. They sit with their veils easy and their eyes bright. A wedding draws near, and they want to prepare the list that shapes the trousseau and the dowry. The ant opens the ledger to the page where family tradition rests beside community rule. She speaks slowly about what stays with the bride, no matter what her own clothing. Her study tablet, a small portion of gold she brings from her mother, and what the groom promises: coin, cloth, a share of a stall if he keeps one, and respect, written as clearly as any number. The jurist's couplet from last night arrives at the door in the young women's mouths. Name the moon, name the risk, name the witness. They laugh, because poetry and cloth can live in the same paragraph. In a moment, the aunt will show them another list that lives in the kitchen. The wedding will invite students and elders, poor neighbors and tired caravan men. Hospitality here is part of the city's education. The aunt's kitchen ledger contains measures for rice, spices, oil, and dates. It also notes who brought what to past gatherings and who might need help this time. She matches a dish to a guest, the way a teacher matches a text to a student. A shy cousin is given the job of arranging. Cliff's, a chatty uncle, gets the market list because he will return with news as well as food. Work becomes welcome, and welcome becomes memory. A household is a school a city can trust. In a moment, we will see how a book moves through this space without becoming either decoration or hostage. A bundle is brought from the chest and placed on a clean cloth. The ant unwraps it, as if greeting a traveler. The manuscript inside is familiar to many hands in the family. Legal primer with margin notes from a grandfather. A mother's neat prayer in the flyleaf. A child's careful dot where he once lost a line and found it again. Tonight, it will go to a neighbor for 2 weeks, pledged with a thumb mark and a word, returning before the second Friday. The recipient also brings a loaf and a tiny packet of salt, not as payment, but as manners. The aunt smiles, ties the bundle, and places it in the neighbor's bag as if placing a sleeping infant. In a moment, the house will show how it guards itself while staying open. Silence sits here with the same ease it has in a mosque. People speak, then stop, and no one rushes to fill the gap. A stranger might think silence means nothing is happening, but you have learned by now that the room is counting, weighing, and remembering in those breaths. When the door knocks at a hurried pace, the aunt lets the speed stay outside. She stands, greets, seats, and sifts the urgency into a small list. A late request for oil is tucked under after supper. A correction to a paper order is written on a slip with a pebble set on top, so it will not walk away. Calm is the first service this house offers. In a moment, a cousin from another quarter will bring news that speaks to the web beyond the wall. Uncle teaches in a lane near Sidioya and needs a mat and lamp for 2 new students whose families arrived from the river towns with little more than names and hope. The aunt opens a niche and pulls a rolled mat set aside for exactly such a call. She adds a small jar of oil and a note of greeting. Then she writes a line in the ledger to remember the gift and its timing. So when the harvest is kind, the house can ask the same family to help another. This is how reciprocity lives here, not as debt, but as rhythm. The city's strength is not only the scholarship and the trade, it is the steady pulse between rooms like this one. In a moment, a misbelief from far away will tap at the window, and the house will answer it without a scold. People sometimes say Timbuktu's learning was a castle of men only, but the walls in this room tell a different story. Women here keep ledgers, arrange endowments, negotiate prices, decide loans, set guest lists, and in more than a few families, teach children their first letters. Some women copy texts. Some compose short poems that keep rules in step. Some own books outright and write their names on flyleaves with a pride that is gentle and exact. Many historians think their work kept the city's libraries alive when storms and wars would have scattered them. The aunt would shrug at debates and pour tea. She knows what her hands do. In a moment, we will follow her to the door, because teaching also lives in how a night ends. She checks the latch, lowers the lamp, and whispers a blessing that names traveling feet, studying eyes, and steady hands. She calls each child by name and sends them to sleep with 1 line of verse from a book none of them owns alone, but all of them carry. The chest settles, the ledger string is tied, and the pot is set where morning's fire will find it easily. The courtyard breathes like a person who has finished a good day. Work done, guests welcomed, accounts honest, kindness given room to walk. You can feel how this house holds the city's mind, the way a palm holds dates, many, sweet, and easy to share. In a moment, our path will return to the lane and meet a traveler who has carried legends like heavy sandals, who expects gold in doorways and finds paper on mats, and who will learn to weigh value with a new hand by dawn. He came with sand in his shoes and stories in his head. For weeks on the road he had listened to other travelers spin Timbuktu into something that glittered even in darkness. They said the city was paved with gold dust, that gates opened only to secret signs, that scholars wore blue robes so fine they made the sky jealous. He reaches the first lane and finds mud walls glowing softly, neighbors greeting each other by name, and a child drawing letters in dust with a stick. The shock is not disappointment, it is relief. The place is you can feel it breathe. In a moment, he will learn how gold looks when it stops pretending to be a sun. A friend guides him to the night market, where lamps float like small moons above mats. The first gold he sees is a thin stream of dust measured by a careful scale, and watched by two calm faces. It is serious but not theatrical, like salt slabs stacked without drama. The traveler smiles at his own earlier picture of glittering streets. Wealth here prefers to travel in pouches and promises, in ledgers and names. When he buys a small sweet, he pays in shells that arrived with riverboats, and learns that money is a set of languages, not one tongue. In a moment, he will step into a courtyard and meet the city's other treasure. The friend takes him to a house that smells of ink and fried dough, where ledgers rest on a shelf and children practice lines from a print. A woman with a neat scarf ties a string round a bundle of paper and adds a slip that names the borrower and the moon. The traveler watches the ease with which property and trust shake hands. He touches a manuscript leaf with 2 fingers, the way a person touches a newborn's palm, and feels the slight tooth of the paper, the steady letters, the quiet pride in a note written in the margin by someone's grandfather. His guide whispers that this page could feed a family if it had to, yet tonight it will feed minds. In a moment, he will meet the scholar whose voice weighs more than gold. After evening prayer, he sits in a circle on mats. The teacher recites a sentence and the room repeats, then turns the meaning like a smooth stone. There is tea, but no hurry. Debate is gentle and exact. The traveler had imagined a sealed academy. He finds instead a network of open rooms tuned by walls and habits. He asks a clumsy question about the city's famous libraries, and hears a friendly answer. The books live in many houses. They are lent and copied like bread, shared in a fast, with care and with witnesses. The quiet shock in him deepens to respect. In a moment, a line of poetry will fold a rule small enough to carry on the road. The poet and the jurist sit in a courtyard, making law sing without turning it into a joke. A contract becomes a couplet. A witness is named in a rhyme that even a busy porter can keep in his head. And a story about a goat and a missing paper becomes a warning that lands without bitterness. The traveler recognizes the wisdom from caravan life. The best rules are those you can hum while tying a load. He had expected secret gates. He finds doors that invite and still keep shape by good manners. He had expected a city of hidden treasure. He finds a city that has learned how to hide haste. In a moment, the market will correct one more picture he brought from far away. He had heard that Timbuktu was the end of the world, a last dot on a map where people whispered out of fear. In the night market he sees the opposite. Roots meet like threads at a loom. A money changer weighs shells and cloth and dust without blinking. A caravan man describes a well by its wind rather than its depth, and the description makes perfect sense. A woman notes 3 favors given and 2 received, and calls the balance peace. The traveler's sense of far starts to loosen. Far is not distance here. Far is a place that does not send news. Timbuktu is close to everything that matters to people who move. In a moment, he will touch a subject the city carries with sober care. On the road he had heard stories that wrapped horrors in boasts. In the market he hears a different tone when people mention those who are taken against their will. Faces grow still. Words shorten. The trader standing near him explains that the desert has carried good and evil in the same caravans for a long time, and that the city has argued with itself about this, sometimes bravely, sometimes not enough. The traveler understands that night cannot hold every thread, that kindness and contradiction share space in all busy places. The conversation moves on by agreement, not denial. Respect is kept. Pain is not turned into spectacle. In a moment, the traveler will be asked a small question that rearranges his pockets. Whose name would vouch for you if you needed credit? The ant in the ledger house asks with a gentle smile. He thinks of coin first, then of the friend who led him here, and answers with that name and with the name of a caravan leader who knows his handwriting. The ant ties a string round a small stack of paper and says, "Then you are not a stranger." He feels rich in a way that would never fit in a chest. The wealth he came looking for turns out to be a web. The city does not ask him to vanish into its myth. It invites him to stand in one square of its net. In a moment, he will learn how the sky also keeps accounts. He walks to the gate where men read stars like a ledger of light. A guide points at a cluster and names the prayer that will sit beneath it in 3 nights' time. The traveler had imagined astronomy as grand and cold. Here it is, close and warm. It pours into cups like tea, not a performance, a service. The North Star is a hinge, the Milky Way a path, a bright planet, a reminder to seek water before noon. The same lights that drew him onward now teach him how to lean his tent away from wind. He laughs at his old picture of secret gates, because the biggest gate is above him, open every night. In a moment, the mosques will give him another correction. He did not know he needed. He thought learning would sit behind high doors. Instead, he sees Sanka catching quiet air in a courtyard, Jingabur laying out long bays of shade, Sidi Yoya guarding a carved promise. He hears pages recited in a room that also holds a market list and a guest bed. He watches people repair a wall with wet earth and jokes, and he understands that maintenance is a kind of memory. The city does not try to impress the sun, it tries to outlast it. He touches a pillar and feels the idea travel through his hand. In a moment, he will think of home and realize that his questions will weigh differently now. He remembers how he told friends he would seek the famous streets of gold. He tries to write new lines in his mind to send back, and all he finds are small pictures, a thumb pressed as a seal on a margin, a girl reading a rule she will later teach her brother, a trader promising lamp oil to a mosque because he once studied under its light, a jurist who breathes before he decides, a poet who turns a contract into a memory that refuses to lie, a woman who keeps 3 keys and uses them like kindness. He understands that a city can be rich in patience, and that patience can buy more safety than dust ever could. In a moment, supper steam will rise nearby, and a neighbor will call him in as if he were expected. He eats simply and well in a courtyard that looks like the one he left. Bread, a spoon of sauce, laughter that avoids sharp corners. Someone asks him for a story from the road, and he tells one about a well that hid until a man named it with the right silence. He asks for a story in return, and he receives one about a boy who carried a book like a jar of water and learned to pour without spilling. The exchange is even. He writes a small note in his own notebook and feels naive for thinking he could catch the night in lines, and still he tries. Because the city has handed him a new rule. Write slowly, speak kindly, check your witness. In a moment, he will step into the lane and see the market fold itself like a prayer mat. Lamps sink. Stalls become bundles. The scribe breathes on a last stroke and ties his pen to a board so it will not lose itself. The money changer hangs his scale where morning light will find it. The traveler stands at the edge and notices how closure here is not a door slamming. It is a chorus finding its last note. He has learned enough to stop trying to push the night into a secret. The city is not hiding, it is resting. We return to the question from our opening walk, how a desert town became a lantern for ideas, and the answer, for him, now has names, doors, and recipes. In a moment, he will sleep in a room near a wall that holds cool, and before dawn, he will wake to the rustle of pages and the soft thud of sandals and understand that wealth can sound like that too. He lies down with the market's hum still settling in his bones. He thinks of the 3 great mosques as friends rather than monuments, of the river's breath as a teacher rather than a boundary, of the stars as letters written for anyone with time to read. He expected gold underfoot. He found paper under hand. He expected gates that opened to passwords. He found courtyards that opened to promises. He expected a city far away. He found a place at the center of many roads. In a moment, The night will pass him to the hour when scribes cover pages, traders tie knots, and students murmur lines, and we will follow him into that last turn before sunrise to see how the city exhales, how it joins the wider Sahel in a quiet handshake, and why this night will still matter when the sun climbs the wall. Before dawn, the city loosens its night like a scarf. Air that slept against the walls rises and moves along the lanes. A lamp glows in a window where a scribe covers a drying page with a clean board so no stray breath will smudge the final line. In another room, a bundle of paper is tied with calm fingers, the knot tucked the way the aunt taught, neat and flat so it will not catch. The call for the first prayer has not yet lifted, but the city is already awake in small ways, careful ways. In a moment, we will see how many hands touch this hour without making it loud. At the gate, the guard stretches his shoulders and looks up. The sky has thinned to a pale band above the roofs, and the last stars seem to pull back like polite guests. A caravan leader checks a strap and taps the edge of a water skin to hear if it answers with the right sound. A boy counts bundles by touch, not by sight, and repeats the number under his breath so his memory will hold it after the path grows long. Traders tie knots now, because knots tied in full sun forget humility. In a moment, a door will open near Saka, and the day's first voice will fold the city into one breath. The dawn call spreads like a thin cloth laid over a table. Men step into courtyards. Women open jars and pour water. Children copy the motions they have watched since they could stand. The traveler wakes with the sound and sits while sleep falls from his eyes. He thinks of the night market and the circle of students, and is surprised that he is not surprised. The pieces already know each other. The call does what the bell did in our monastery journey. It gathers scattered thoughts and asks them to walk together. In a moment, sandals will touch packed earth, and the first conversations will sketch the day. Scribes speak mostly with their hands in this hour. A reed pen is tested and set aside. A board is polished with a smooth stone. A little gum is loosened in a cup with a drop of water warmed by a sleeping ember. A short line is added to a ledger, returned before the second Friday, and a blessing is written in the corner so the page feels finished to both eye and heart. A jurist steps into a lane with a small bundle under his arm and greets a porter by name. The city is a necklace strung at daybreak, each name a bead. In a moment, we will walk toward the river port, where the wider world breathes in and out. Koryum wakes with low voices and the rattle of coils of rope. Boats that rode the night tide to posts now lean toward the channel, their bellies still wet with sand-colored water. Men load baskets of grain, bales of cloth, and bundles wrapped in leather and oilskin that hold pages for towns along the river. A woman hands a small package to a boatman and names the aunt who will receive it in the next place, and that is enough. The river is not only a road, it is a cousin. Messages float downstream and return as new orders, new verses, new prices, new names to vouch for. In a moment, we will follow the river in our minds to the places that answer Timbuktu like distant rooms in the same house. Downstream lies a web of towns that speak many tongues but share habits, a market that trusts names, a mosque that cools voices, a family that keeps a ledger next to bread, a scribe who finishes a page by touching the corner with his little finger to test the dryness. Upstream and overland lie other kind desert posts where salt is born and oases where dates hang, like lamps. Many historians think Timbuktu's strength in its bright years came from this belonging. It was not a lonely miracle, but a good listener in a choir of places across the Sahel and the Sahara. It gathered ideas without hoarding them and sent them back improved with notes in the margins. In a moment, we will listen to how those ideas traveled inside languages. You hear Arabic in the lesson circles, sure and steady, trained by centuries of texts. You also hear Songhay in courtyards and markets, and Tamashek on caravan paths, and Fulfeld in deals over cattle, and Bambara in kitchens, where recipes are also contracts. A rule might be learned in one language, argued in another, sung in a third, and recorded in a fourth, and no one worries so long as the sense stays clean. Law and poetry move together more easily when they can cross tongues without losing warmth. A traveler brings a proverb from a river town, and a poet turns it into a verse that a jurist can use to steady a decision. In a moment, we will look at a book and see this braid in ink. A manuscript leaves the city with a main text in a strong hand, and margin notes that speak softer. The notes may carry a teacher's name, a local custom, or a new example that makes an old rule walk more easily. In a new town, the copyist who will see this book a year from now, in another place, will add his own comment in a small, slanting line, and the next reader will see 3 generations in one glance. This is how knowledge becomes more than paper. It becomes a conversation you can carry. It is also how a star seen above one wall can help a traveler far away find the right hour for prayer, or the right time to sign a contract. In a moment, we will return to the lanes and notice how small tasks at dawn keep the city's promises to itself. In the scriptorium corner, a boy wipes a tablet so another child can write the first letters fresh. In the kitchen, a woman sets tea to boil and lays out bread for the scholar who will teach until the sun stands high. At the gate, the guard speaks with the caravan leader about the path out and the gossip in. Near Sidi Yoya, a broom moves across the threshold to lift last night's dust into the morning, and a girl fills a lamp that burned low during study. None of this is grand. All of it is necessary. A city can be a lantern only if someone trims the wick every day. In a moment, the traveler will stand in the quiet square where the 3 great mosques seem to breathe together, and will feel the larger map touch his feet. He thinks of towns to the north, where coins look the same but names do not. Of ports across water, where people wear new dyes and old manners. Of market lanes where drums keep a beat for goods that would surprise this place and still fit on its mats. The Sahel is a belt with many holes. Cities like this tighten and loosen it with seasons and rain. Timbuktu's night has been one stitch in that belt. It has held books, taught rules, weighed salt and kindness, watched stars for safety, and written down what it learned in margins that invite more hands. In a moment, we will let a later rumor drift in so we can place it gently on the table. Centuries after this hour, people reading far away will argue about whether the libraries were counted correctly, whether this or that ruler was kinder than another, whether a traveler exaggerated or forgot. Those are fair questions. Many historians think the number of books was large but not endless, the students many but not all-day crowds, the trade rich but not always stable, the peace real but sometimes fragile. The night you walked shows a stronger truth that numbers alone cannot measure, a habit of respect that made rooms safe for debate, a rhythm that kept law and poetry from quarreling, and a network that let a page written here shape a fair deal. In a place a month away, in a moment, the sun will touch the beams, and the city will shift its weight from night to day. The call for morning prayer now rises fully, and the traveler joins the line with men he met last night, and men he may never see again. The floor is cool, the words are familiar, and the light that enters afterward looks like a promise kept. Students gather with boards under their arms. A jurist rolls a mat where he will sit to hear a case after the second prayer. A copyist lifts a reed the way a musician lifts a bow. The caravan rope tightens, hooves test the street. A woman closes a ledger and ties it with the same string that closes bread. In a moment, the river breeze will tip a corner of cloth, and the day will begin to speak in a brighter voice. You can leave now and carry what the night taught. That books can be both savings and gifts. That law walked more softly when poetry traveled with it. That paper moved like water and made a dry land think better. That women kept keys and calendars without asking permission from any myth. That stars were not decorations but tools that let people share a road without being afraid of each other. And that a city can be famous in quiet ways that survive longer than any shout. We return to our first open question, how a desert town became a lantern for ideas, and see how the answer rests in 1,000 small acts. A knot tied at dawn, a verse learned by heart, a pledge written with thumbs, a lamp fed with oil promised. After a good sail, the traveler steps into his day, lighter than he arrived. He has no gold in his pouch beyond what he needs, but he holds lines he can use when markets get loud and roads grow long. He knows whose names would vouch for him now, and he knows how to greet a room without waking old dust. He will carry a page from a borrowed book, copied in his own careful hand, with a line in the margin that says where he learned it and why it mattered. If you listen, you can hear the city still breathing behind him, pages turning, ledgers closing, sandals brushing the earth. In a moment, if you ask for a rap, we will fold this night, the way the scribe covered his last page, and speak one last low sentence about why Timbuktu's quiet work is still a good light to carry when the sun climbs. Night opened and closed around a city that knew how to keep its voice low and its lights steady. We began with 3 quiet questions. How did books become a kind of currency without turning hard? How did people tell the hour when the sky set the rules? And how did learning, trade, prayer, and family share the same cool air without stepping on one another's feet? After walking the lanes, courtyards, and gate, the answers sit within reach, warm as a lamp that has burned all night without smoke. Books became currency because they never stopped being bread. A page here could buy grain in a pinch, yes, but most nights it bought clarity, justice, and the chance for a child to hold a better rule in the morning. Families kept ledgers beside kettles and wrote kindness into the margins, lending with witnesses, charging fairly, and pledging volumes to endowments that fed lamps and lessons long after the first owner slept. In that rhythm, value stayed human, a book earned by being read, a debt cooled by a verse, and savings looked like a chest of pages wrapped in cloth, ready to move when a neighbor knocked. Time was told by listening, not by chasing. The call to prayer folded the city into shared breath. Stars gave bearings to caravans, and the North Star served like a hinge for wide roads. Markets counted by moons and Fridays, houses by cups and errands, mosques by lamps and voices. When clouds erased shadows, the waters dripped, and a watchman's bones kept faith. You felt how the hour belonged to the sky and the community at once. No one needed to shout now, when roofs, lanes, and people already agreed to meet and study. Trade, devotion, and home life walked together because each knew when to lead and when to step aside. A scholar's circle became a market of ideas without turning harsh. A market practiced law without turning cold. A family ran accounts without losing welcome. A mosque held classrooms without closing its doors to prayer. The same hands that tied caravan knots also promised oil for lamps. The same voices that weighed salt shaped contracts into couplets a porter could hum. The weave held because patience did the stitching. So the city you met was not the loud legend of golden streets. It was a lantern made of smaller lightscopyists working by steady flame. Ants who kept 3 keys and 3 promises. Guides who read the sky like a ledger, jurists who breathed before deciding, poets who taught rules to travel kindly. That quiet skill is why the story still matters. In a restless world, Timbuktu's habit was to move wealth as trust, time as agreement, and knowledge as hospitality. If you like this slower pace, you can subscribe, and we will keep walking old places, in the same calm way. For now, let the desert wind turn soft in your thoughts. Picture a page covered for the night, a string tied flat, a last lamp trimmed, and a sky that keeps its gate open for anyone willing to look up. The city sleeps, the river breathes, the stars hold their places, and you can let your own breath match them, easy and even, until morning finds you rested.